This is Joe Smith from the Midwest Football Podcast. Please remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. It all helps us grow our show. Look for our full show, too, anywhere you find podcasts. Links below.
I think one thing we didn't cover that a lot of people will love to hear about was the Jalen Carter fall, because he clearly was not on Seattle, Detroit, or Chicago's draft boards. Well, this haunts us because Detroit saw him on the board and said, nope, we're trading back to 12 and we're taking a running back. Chicago saw him at 9 and said, Eagles, you take him. Give us a future fourth round pick. We're taking our tackle instead. And there must be something else going on back there. Maybe it was the fact that he didn't look good as pro day, interviewing poorly, in addition to his off-field issues.
Yeah, it was head scratching to me. I'm starting to see reports come out that his snap count was very low for Georgia last year, and there were some business decisions that came up on his tape that people were not too happy with, but this also might have been justification after the fact.
From that perspective, he might have landed in the best spot because no one runs a deeper defensive line than Philly. They tend to rotate their players. So if he's not in the great shape, he'll be fine. He can run his 300 snaps a year instead of 600 or 800. And maybe he'll be a good steal for them where he wouldn't be as effective for one of the other teams because they don't have as much defensive line depth. So
Yeah,
maybe
for
everybody.
Detroit, he would have been out there every single snap that he had oxygen in his body.
Yeah. And he might have had a heart attack on the field based on the conditioning reports I've heard.
Well, I mean, you have to admit he's had a mentally rough couple months. Some of that, admittedly of his own making.
And just to tie a bow off on it, he wasn't on the Chicago board because not only did they trade back one spot to get just a future fourth, but then they went and drafted 3 defensive tackles that play his position. So I don't think they were interested in him because they definitely are looking to upgrade their defensive tackles, and he was the best one on the board. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that threw me was when the Raiders passed on him. When the Raiders are
That's so
passing on
cool.
someone for character concerns, I mean, did hell freeze? What is
I didn't even
going
think
on there?
about that. Raiders. Wow.
Now, I mean, they might have legitimately had Tyree Wilson ahead of them.
He's a Raiders
Like,
guy. Let's be honest.
yeah. And, Atlanta seemed pretty locked on to Bijan, so we can't say that Carter was off their board.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that Seattle, Detroit, and Chicago had him either off the board or so low that they might as well have had him off the board.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
If he ends up being an Antonio Brown head case or a Jamarcus Russell can't stay in shape, then they look like geniuses. But if he ends up looking like this generation's Warren Sapp, for those of you who aren't, geezers like me, apparently, I'm sitting here in my early 40s. Warren Sapp was accused of marijuana back when that was a very serious thing in the early mid 90s, right like on draft day or the day before, where nobody could vet it. And he fell in the draft to Tampa, who gleefully snapped him up and used him to wreck NFL offenses for his entire career.
I believe he was Super Bowl MVP in '01, right? Around that time?
That sounds right.
Yeah.
When Tampa won their first one.
Yeah. Yep. The one without Brady. And yeah, so that's a good point. And I take solace in the Bears passing on him because I was really hoping we'd show up the offensive line and keep Justin Fields alive. I think that's more important than, defensive tackle, even if he's that great. I just want to keep Fields alive because I think it'll be fun to watch him, even if it's just because I'm a double homer as a Buckeye and a Bears fan. Love
Granted,
to see that.
but I felt like he was exactly the position that the Lions needed the most. And if they were that head over heels for Jameer Gibbs and the linebacker Carpenter, maybe you trade back into the first round for the third of them. And I mean, I get it. If you legitimately have Jameer Gibbs as the third player on your board and you've already traded down to 12, yeah, I could see why you would be nervous and you would make that trade. But they're just about the only ones on the planet. I don't think Jahmyr Gibbs' mother had Jahmyr Gibbs third on the board.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if maybe they weren't expecting Bijan to go in the top 10 and that caused them to panic and just take Gibbs at 12 because they were like, well, there's two guys we wanted and one of them's already gone.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I really feel like, though, it was just the guy that they couldn't imagine not being there. The cornerback from Illinois.
A Witherspoon.
Yeah. He just, when he wasn't there, I think they felt pickless. But look, that's the other thing that you can criticize the Lions for. If you've legitimately got a two-player super elite tier, then why didn't you move up?
Yeah. I mean, they could have moved up to 3 or, like Houston did. Gone and get a guy.